Since its inception in the early 90s, MMA and pro wrestling have been regular bedfellows, but recent years have seen the two industries crossing paths with increasing regularity. Today, we look at some of the biggest stars to swap the Octagon for the squared circle, with their rankings based on their success and influence in their respective fields. Welcome to the INC, and these are 5 MMA fighters turned pro wrestlers. Number 5. Minoru Suzuki. Minoru Suzuki isn't the most well-known name on the list, but is arguably the most influential. Suzuki made his wrestling debut in 1988 competing for New Japan Pro Wrestling. A spell with the upstart UWF followed before he and Masakatsu Funaki left the business to form their own hybrid fighting promotion. The firm, known as Pancrase, was considered the first true MMA promotion, with Suzuki using his catch wrestling background to become one of the sport's first stars, claiming wins over Ken Shamrock, Maurice Smith, and Guy Mezger, and winning the King of Pancrase openweight title in 1995. Suzuki was considered one of the sport's most respected fighters throughout the late 90s, before retiring in 2003 with 30 wins and 19 losses. While most fighters would ride into the sunset, Suzuki instead returned to pro wrestling, freelancing between promotions in Japan before a 4-year spell with All Japan where he became a 2-time Triple Crown champion. Even into his 40s, Suzuki remained one of Japanese wrestling's biggest stars, with 4 further titles with New Japan Pro Wrestling, while his matches with Hiroshi Tanahashi and AJ Styles were voted Fights of the Year by Wrestling Observer. Suzuki was inducted into the Hall of Fame in 2017, and even into his 50s remains intimidating as ever.
それとよ、おい、岡田和親 IWGP チャンピオン。暗い道と後ろには気をつけな。
Number 4. Ronda Rousey. Ronda Rousey was seemingly tailor-made for pro wrestling, but many were surprised by just how quickly she got to grips with the sport. After becoming the first American judoka to medal at the Olympics, Rousey made her MMA debut in 2011. Her aggressive style, good looks, and brash persona made her one of the sport's most popular stars, and she became a key figure in the UFC introduction of women's divisions in 2013. During her tenure, Rousey would become one of American sport's biggest stars, amassing 12 straight wins, with 11 coming in the first round, and culminating in her being the first woman inducted into the UFC Hall of Fame. Rousey had been a fan of pro wrestling dating back to her childhood, and after months of speculation made her WWE debut at the Royal Rumble event in 2018. After a rough start, where even pointing at a sign seemed awkward, Rousey quickly answered her critics, winning over fans with her work ethic and ability to perform at a high level despite her limited experience. And it wasn't long before the company made her their women's champion in the summer. Rousey became a central figure in the WWE's women's revolution, with the company ditching their sexualized image and giving women meaningful matches and storylines. And it wasn't long before her friends and even her family started getting in on the act. Rousey's stature saw her front the company's first all-female pay-per-view, and in April 2019, she became the first woman to headline the company's flagship show, WrestleMania. Rousey has taken a break from wrestling to start a family, but does so after one of the industry's strongest debut years. Just about.
I want to thank Sasha making me get better today than she was just... Alright, you got me to stutter, good job.
Number 3. Dan Severn. For nearly 30 years, Dan Severn has been a staple of the MMA and wrestling conscious. After an acclaimed amateur career where he amassed over 100 titles, Severn made his pro wrestling debut under the guidance of trainer Al Snow, first for the Universal Wrestling Federation before moving to the National Wrestling Alliance. While still performing with the NWA, Severn made his MMA bow at UFC 4, beating Anthony Macias and Marcus Bossett before succumbing to Royce Gracie in the final. When Gracie left the UFC in 1995, Severn flourished, using his superior strength and grappling power to win the company's next 2 heavyweight tournaments, and culminating in his super fight title win over Ken Shamrock at UFC 9. Severn later enjoyed a short spell with the WWE in 1998, where he was one of the key faces of the company's NWA invasion, and he enjoyed a long feud with MMA rival Shamrock. While lacking in charisma, Severn's technical prowess received praise by many in the community, while his role as a trainer paved the way for many of the industry's biggest stars. Severn turned to the regional scene in 2000, where he split his time between MMA and pro wrestling. Although, as his match with Shannon Rich showed, he'd sometimes forget which was which.
You know, he comes over there and he rolls a work with Shannon Rich, and it just was complete unprofessional bullshit.
Severn formally retired from MMA in 2013, having amassed over 100 professional wins. His pro wrestling career, however, remains as active as ever. Number 2. Ken Shamrock. Ken Shamrock is one of the most important names on this list, both as an MMA pioneer and key figure in pro wrestling's golden age. Although Shamrock dabbled in pro wrestling early in his career, it was his spell with Pancrase where he first came to prominence, becoming the first American champion and holding wins over Maurice Smith and Bas Rutten. Shamrock would also become a staple of the UFC's early years, competing in the company's first tournament in 1993 and later becoming super fight champion with a submission win over Dan Severn. Shamrock would defend the title twice before losing a rematch to Severn at UFC 9, by which time concerns over pay and rule restrictions saw him revive his pro wrestling career. Shamrock became a full-time member of the WWE roster in 1997. At the time, the company was transitioning to an edgier product known as the Attitude Era, and Shamrock's intense persona and aggressive style saw him become one of the company's most popular stars. Shamrock enjoyed large success during his time with the promotion, winning the Intercontinental title as well as the 1998 King of the Ring, while his flexibility saw him slide from main event programs to feuding with a porn star over his kayfabe sister. It's wrestling, just go with it. Although Shamrock's return to the UFC was unsuccessful, it did have a long-term impact. His match with Tito Ortiz in the UFC is often cited as the most important in company history, with Shamrock even bringing some pro wrestling bravado to the fight's build.
I hope to God you come ready, because if you don't, I'm going to beat you into the living death.
Shamrock was inducted to the UFC Hall of Fame in 2003, before finally hanging up the gloves with 28 wins and 17 losses. Number 1. Brock Lesnar. Brock Lesnar remains a divisive figure in both MMA and pro wrestling, but there's no denying the impact the South Dakota native has had in both industries. Lesnar made his WWE debut in 2002 and was immediately pushed as a star thanks to his huge size, versatile skill set, and aggressive style. In his tenure with the company, Lesnar became a 3-time champion, as well as the 2002 King of the Ring, before falling out with the company's top brass saw him leave the promotion in 2004. After his NFL career failed to ignite, Lesnar turned his attention to MMA. As a result of winning his pro debut in convincing fashion, Lesnar was signed by the UFC in 2007. Shortly after controversially losing his debut to Frank Mir in the UFC, Lesnar rebounded with a dominant win over Pride veteran Heath Herring, thus earning himself a title shot against heavyweight champion Randy Couture at UFC 91. Many believed Lesnar solely earned the shot due to star power, only for the Beast Incarnate to answer his critics in the middle of the second round.
Brock Lesnar is the new UFC heavyweight champion of the world!
Lesnar would become one of the UFC's longest reigning heavyweight champions, avenging his loss to Mir at UFC 100 and coming from behind to end the winning streak of heavyweight juggernaut Shane Carwin. Unfortunately, his magical run came to an end when the next big thing suffered 2 emphatic losses in the Octagon, and then the ultimate loss. A battle with diverticulitis saw him retire in 2011. Lesnar returned to the WWE, where he'd earn a further 6 titles and become one of the most dominant champions of all time. While his run-ins with Daniel Cormier and Mark Hunt mean the door hasn't closed on an MMA return. Just don't ask the latter about it.
Fuck you, you're getting sued. You scummy cunts, you think. I mean, the problem is everyone thinks, hey man, I want to get into the UFC. Fuck the UFC, you're shit.
And now, time for a few honorable mentions. Tito Ortiz enjoyed a spell with Impact Wrestling in 2013, but giving a microphone to one of the sport's worst talkers isn't always the best idea.
And I kick many of butts across this world and across the United States.
Josh Barnett split his time between MMA and pro wrestling, depending on whether he'd been caught for steroids. Mirko Cro Cop made a one-off appearance at a New Year's Eve show in Japan. It ended as you expected. This is the INC, and thank you for watching.